It's June 1979, and inside the sterile walls of UCLA Medical Center, one of Hollywood's greatest legends is slipping away. The man who defined the American West on screen, who rode across dusty plains and fought outlaws with a swagger no one could imitate, now lies motionless in a hospital bed. His breathing is shallow, his once commanding voice reduced to a whisper. But on this particular afternoon, something extraordinary is about to happen. Through the doorway walks a woman with fiery red hair and eyes that still sparkle with the same Irish fire they had nearly 3 decades ago. Maureen O'Hara has come to see her dearest friend one last time. What John Wayne whispered to her in those final moments would stay with her for the rest of her life. A secret so profound that it changed everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the bonds we forge in between. To understand the weight of this moment, you have to go back to where it all began. Hollywood in 1950 was a different world. The golden age of cinema was at its peak, and the studios were churning out westerns faster than you could say draw. Republic Pictures had just secured the rights to a story about a cavalry officer stationed at a remote outpost along the Rio Grande. They needed someone tough, someone who could embody the spirit of the American frontier. They needed John Wayne. And for the female lead, director John Ford had someone very specific in mind. He wanted an actress who could match Wayne's intensity, someone who wouldn't be overshadowed by his towering presence. He wanted Maureen O'Hara, the stunning Irish beauty who had already proven she could hold her own in any picture. When Maureen first met Duke, as everyone called him, on the set of Rio Grande, there was an instant connection. Not romantic, mind you, despite what the gossip columns would later suggest. No, this was something deeper, something rarer in Hollywood. It was a friendship built on mutual respect, shared values, and an understanding that went beyond words. Duke saw in Maureen a kindred spirit, someone who valued loyalty, honesty, and hard work above all else. She wasn't interested in the Hollywood games, the backstabbing, or the endless quest for fame. She was there to do the work, to create art, and to go home at the end of the day with her integrity intact. Duke admired that about her from the very first day they met. Maureen, for her part, saw past the cowboy persona that Duke had cultivated over the years. Sure, he was tough on screen, but off camera, he was thoughtful, generous, and surprisingly gentle. He treated everyone on set with respect, from the director down to the crew members who swept up at the end of the day. He had a wicked sense of humor and could make her laugh until tears streamed down her face. But he also had a serious side, a philosophical streak that came out during their long conversations between takes. They would talk about everything: politics, religion, family, the meaning of life. Duke had strong opinions about everything, and he wasn't afraid to share them, but he also listened. He genuinely cared about what Maureen thought, and that was rare for a leading man in those days. Rio Grande was just the beginning. The film was a success, and audiences loved the chemistry between Duke and Maureen. So when John Ford decided to make The Quiet Man in 1952, there was no question who would play opposite Duke. The film was shot on location in Ireland, in the lush green countryside that Maureen had known as a child. For her, it was like coming home, and having Duke there made it even more special. They spent weeks filming in the small village of Tsong, living among the locals, soaking up the culture, and creating what would become one of the most beloved romantic films of all time. The Quiet Man wasn't just a movie, it was a love letter to Ireland, and the authenticity of the performances came from the genuine affection Duke and Maureen had for each other and for the land they were celebrating. There's a famous scene at the end of The Quiet Man where Maureen whispers something into Duke's ear. To this day, no one knows exactly what she said. Maureen took that secret to her grave, refusing to tell even the most persistent interviewers. She would always smile and say it was something between her and Duke, something only they would understand. That little mystery became part of Hollywood lore, a reminder that some things are meant to remain private, even in an industry that thrives on exposure. But it also symbolized the special bond they shared, a connection that went beyond the script, beyond the cameras, beyond the Hollywood machine. Over the next few years, Duke and Maureen would make 3 more films together. The Wings of Eagles in 1957, McLintock, in 1963, and Big Jake in 1971. Each film showcased their incredible chemistry, that unique blend of tension and tenderness that made audiences fall in love with them over and over again. They could fight like cats and dogs on screen, hurling insults and trading blows, and then in the next scene, they'd share a look that conveyed more emotion than 1,000 words ever could. Critics praised their performances, But what they didn't realize was that much of what they were seeing was real. Duke and Maureen genuinely cared about each other, and that authenticity translated beautifully on screen. But life wasn't all movie sets and premiere parties. Both Duke and Maureen had their share of personal struggles. Duke went through multiple marriages, each one ending in heartbreak. He had 7 children from his first 2 marriages, and while he loved them deeply, he struggled with the demands of fatherhood. He was often away on location, and when he was home, he wasn't always emotionally available. Maureen understood this about him. She had her own challenges, including a difficult marriage to director Will Price and later to aviator Charles Blair. She knew what it was like to feel torn between career and family, to wonder if you were making the right choices, to lie awake at night questioning everything. Through it all, Duke and Maureen remained close. They would call each other on the phone, sometimes talking for hours. When Duke was going through a particularly rough divorce, Maureen was there to listen, to offer advice, to remind him that he was stronger than he thought. And when Maureen lost her husband Charles Blair in a tragic plane crash in 1978, Duke was one of the first people to reach out. He couldn't fix her pain, but he could be there, and sometimes that's all anyone needs. Their friendship was a constant in an industry notorious for its fickleness, a reminder that genuine human connection could survive even in Hollywood. By the mid-1970s, Duke's health began to decline. He had battled cancer before, back in 1964, when surgeons removed his entire left lung along with several ribs. He bounced back from that, defying the odds and continuing to make films. But cancer is a relentless adversary, and in January 1979, Duke underwent surgery again, this time to remove his stomach. The doctors told him the cancer had spread, that there wasn't much more they could do. Duke, ever the stoic, accepted the news with characteristic grace. He knew his time was running out, and he was determined to face death the same way he had lived, with courage and dignity. As the weeks passed, Duke grew weaker. He was admitted to UCLA Medical Center, where he spent his final days surrounded by family. His children came to visit, some more frequently than others. His ex-wife Pilar was there, putting aside their differences to be with him in his final hours. Friends from Hollywood stopped by to pay their respects, to say goodbye to a man who had defined an era. But there was one person whose presence Duke requested above all others, Maureen O'Hara. When Maureen got the call, she was at home in the Virgin Islands. She had retired from acting a few years earlier and was enjoying a quieter life away from the cameras. But when she heard that Duke was dying, she didn't hesitate. She immediately booked a flight to Los Angeles, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she was about to lose one of the most important people in her life. The flight seemed to take forever, and during those long hours in the air, Maureen found herself reflecting on their friendship, on all the moments they had shared, on the laughter and the tears and everything in between. When Maureen finally arrived at the hospital, she was shocked by what she saw. Duke, the man who had seemed invincible, was a shadow of his former self. He had lost so much weight that his face looked gaunt, almost skeletal. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his breathing was labored. But when he saw Maureen walk into the room, his eyes lit up. For a moment, it was like the old Duke was back, the man with the twinkle in his eye and the easy smile. Maureen fought back tears as she approached his bedside, determined to be strong for him. She pulled up a chair and took his hand in hers. His grip was weak, but he squeezed her fingers gently, letting her know he was glad she was there. For a while, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. They just sat there, holding hands, drawing strength from each other's presence. Outside the room, the world continued to turn, but in that moment, time seemed to stand still. It was just the two of them, two old friends sharing one last moment together. Eventually, Duke broke the silence. His voice was barely above a whisper, and Maureen had to lean in close to hear him. He told her how much her friendship had meant to him over the years, how she had been a constant source of light in his life. He thanked her for never judging him, for always being there when he needed her, for being one of the few people in Hollywood he could truly trust. Maureen's eyes filled with tears as she listened, her heart breaking with every word. She wanted to tell him to save his strength, to rest, but she knew he needed to say these things, to get them off his chest before it was too late. Then Duke said something that Maureen would never forget. He looked at her with those famous blue eyes, now dimmed by illness but still holding a spark of life, and he whispered, "I'm not afraid, Maureen. I've lived a good life, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. But I want you to know something. You made this life better. You made me better. And I'm going to miss you, kid." The tears Maureen had been holding back finally spilled over, streaming down her face. She squeezed his hand tighter, wishing she could somehow transfer her strength to him, wishing she could keep him here just a little longer. But that wasn't all. Duke had one more thing to say, something he had been saving for this moment. He pulled Maureen closer, his voice dropping to an even softer whisper, and he told her something deeply personal, something that went to the very core of who he was. What exactly he said, Maureen never publicly revealed. She kept that secret locked in her heart for the rest of her life, just as she had kept the secret of what she whispered to him in The Quiet Man. Some things, she believed, were too sacred to share with the world. But whatever Duke told her in those final moments had a profound impact on her. She later said that his words changed the way she viewed life and death, that they gave her a sense of peace she had never known before. After Duke finished speaking, Maureen did something that epitomized their relationship. Instead of dissolving into grief, she put on what she called her cheerful Irish act. She started telling him stories, funny anecdotes from their time on set, reminding him of the pranks they had pulled on each other and the good times they had shared. She made him laugh, which was no easy feat given his condition. His laughter was weak and hoarse, but it was genuine, and for those few minutes the pain and the fear melted away. They were just Duke and Maureen again, two friends enjoying each other's company, just like the old days. Maureen stayed with Duke for hours that day, and she returned the next day and the day after that. She was there as much as the hospital staff would allow, refusing to leave his side. She read to him, sang Irish songs softly, and held his hand through the worst of the pain. She became his anchor, his connection to the world he was slowly leaving behind. The other visitors came and went, but Maureen remained steadfast and loyal until the very end. On June 11, 1979, at 5:23 in the afternoon, John Wayne took his last breath. Maureen wasn't in the room at that exact moment. She had stepped out briefly to give his family some private time. But she was nearby, and when the news came, she felt a piece of her heart break off and float away. Duke was gone, and the world suddenly seemed a little dimmer, a little less colorful. For Maureen, it was like losing a part of herself. Duke had been more than a friend. He had been a confidant, a partner, a brother in arms. And now he was gone. The funeral was held a few days later at Pacific View Memorial Park in Corona del March. It was a private ceremony, attended only by family and close friends. Maureen was there, of course, dressed in black, her face composed but her eyes red from crying. She didn't speak at the service. She couldn't trust herself to get through it without breaking down. Instead, she stood quietly in the back, listening as others shared their memories of Duke, adding her silent prayers to theirs. When it was over and everyone had filed out, Maureen lingered by the grave for a few extra minutes, saying her own private goodbye. In the months and years that followed, Maureen struggled with Duke's death. She had lost friends before, but this was different. Duke had been a constant in her life for nearly 3 decades, and without him, she felt adrift. She threw herself into her work, taking on projects that would have intimidated most people. But late at night, when the work was done and the house was quiet, she would think about Duke and the conversations they had shared. She would remember his laugh, his terrible jokes, his unwavering loyalty. And she would remember those final words he had whispered to her, words that continued to resonate long after he was gone. Maureen eventually found peace, but it took time. She came to realize that Duke wouldn't want her to spend the rest of her life mourning him. He would want her to live, to laugh, to embrace every moment with the same passion and intensity that had defined their friendship. So that's what she did. She continued acting for a few more years, then retired to her beloved Ireland, where she spent her final decades surrounded by family and the rolling green hills she loved so much. But Duke was never far from her thoughts. She kept a photo of the two of them on her mantle, taken during the filming of The Quiet Man, both of them young and full of life, grinning at the camera like they didn't have a care in the world. When interviewers asked Maureen about Duke in her later years, her face would always soften. She would talk about his kindness, his generosity, his fierce loyalty to those he loved. She would describe him as the best man she ever knew, the truest friend anyone could ask for. And when they inevitably asked about those final moments at his deathbed, about what he had whispered to her, she would smile that mysterious smile and say, "That's between Duke and me. Some things are meant to stay private." It was her way of protecting their friendship, of keeping a part of Duke alive in her heart where no one else could reach. The bond between John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara transcended the typical Hollywood friendship. It was built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. In an industry known for its superficiality and backstabbing, they found something real, something that lasted. Their on-screen chemistry was electric because their off-screen friendship was authentic. They didn't have to pretend to like each other. They actually did. And that authenticity is why their films continue to resonate with audiences today. When you watch The Quiet Man or McLintock, or any of their other films together, you're not just watching two actors playing their parts. You're watching two friends who genuinely cared about each other, and that makes all the difference. Duke and Maureen's friendship also serves as a reminder of what's truly important in life. In a world that often prioritizes fame, money, and success above all else, they showed that genuine human connection is what really matters. Duke could have filled his life with yes-men and hangers-on, people who were only interested in what he could do for them. Instead, he chose to surround himself with people like Maureen, people who valued him for who he was, not what he represented. And Maureen, who could have easily ridden her beauty and talent to the top without ever forming meaningful relationships, chose to invest in friendships that enriched her life and made her a better person. The story of Duke's final days and Maureen's vigil at his bedside is one of the most touching in Hollywood history. It's a story about loyalty, about being there for the people you love when they need you most. Maureen didn't have to fly to Los Angeles. She didn't have to spend those long hours at Duke's bedside, reading to him and holding his hand. She could have stayed in the Virgin Islands, sent flowers and a card, and called it a day. But that wasn't who she was, and it wasn't the kind of friendship they had. She showed up because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up, even when it's hard, even when it breaks your heart, because being there is the greatest gift you can give. What Duke whispered to Maureen in those final moments remains one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. Was it a confession? A final piece of advice? A declaration of love, platonic but profound? We'll never know, and perhaps that's as it should be. Not everything needs to be dissected and analyzed. Some things are sacred, meant to be kept between the people who experience them. Whatever Duke said, it clearly had a deep impact on Maureen. She carried those words with her for the rest of her life, drawing strength and comfort from them in her own difficult moments. In many ways, Duke and Maureen's friendship represents the best of what Hollywood used to be. It was a time when stars actually formed genuine relationships, when they worked together film after film, building chemistry and trust. Today's Hollywood is different. Actors jet in for a few weeks of filming, then move on to the next project, rarely forming the kind of deep bonds that Duke and Maureen shared. The studio system, for all its flaws, created an environment where people spent years working together, and those years forged friendships that lasted a lifetime. Duke and Maureen were products of that system, and their friendship is a testament to its positive aspects. When Maureen O'Hara passed away in 2015 at the age of 95, she left behind an incredible legacy. She was remembered as a talented actress, a devoted mother, and a fierce advocate for her Irish heritage. But for those who knew her best, she was also remembered as John Wayne's dearest friend, the woman who stood by him until the very end. In her final years, Maureen often spoke about looking forward to seeing Duke again, to continuing the conversation they had started so many years ago on the set of Rio Grande. Whether you believe in an afterlife or not, there's something comforting about that image. Duke and Maureen, reunited at last, trading stories and laughing just like the old days. The lessons we can learn from Duke and Maureen's friendship are timeless. First, genuine relationships are worth investing in. In a world of superficial connections and fleeting interactions, finding someone who truly understands you is rare and precious. Second, loyalty matters. Being there for your friends in their darkest hours is one of the most meaningful things you can do. Third, some things are worth keeping private. In an age of social media oversharing, there's something refreshing about maintaining boundaries, about keeping certain things sacred. Fourth, don't let time or distance erode important relationships. Duke and Maureen made an effort to stay connected, even when they weren't working together, and that effort paid dividends throughout their lives. The story of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara is ultimately a love story, just not the kind Hollywood usually tells. It's a story about platonic love, the kind that doesn't need romance or physical attraction to be profound. It's about two people who found in each other a kindred spirit, someone who made life richer and more meaningful. It's about showing up, being present, and valuing the people who matter most. And it's about the words we leave behind, the final messages we impart to those we love, messages that echo long after we're gone. As Maureen sat by Duke's bedside in those final days, watching him slip away, she could have been bitter about the unfairness of it all. She could have raged against fate, against the cancer that was stealing her friend away too soon. But instead, she chose grace. She chose to make his final hours as comfortable as possible, to fill them with laughter and warmth instead of tears and despair. That choice reflects the depth of their friendship and the strength of her character. She knew that the best gift she could give Duke was her presence, uncomplicated by her own grief. There would be time for mourning later. In that moment, she just needed to be there. The whisper, that final secret Duke shared with Maureen, has taken on an almost mythical quality over the years. People have speculated endlessly about what he might have said. Some believe it was a confession of deeper feelings, a revelation that their friendship had always been something more. Others think it was practical advice, final wisdom from a man who had lived a full and complicated life. Still others believe it was something spiritual, a glimpse into Duke's thoughts about mortality and what comes after. The truth is, we'll never know, and that's okay. The mystery adds to the legend, but more importantly, it honors the privacy of two people who deserve to have some things remain just between them. What we do know is that Maureen was forever changed by whatever Duke told her. Friends noticed a shift in her after his death, a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. She seemed less afraid of death, more accepting of life's natural rhythms. She threw herself into living fully, pursuing her passions with renewed vigor. It was as if Duke's final words had unlocked something in her, giving her permission to embrace life without fear or regret. That transformation is Duke's lasting gift to Maureen, a final act of friendship that extended beyond the grave. The films that Duke and Maureen made together remain popular to this day. The Quiet Man, in particular, is considered a classic, regularly appearing on lists of the greatest romantic films ever made. When modern audiences watch these movies, they're watching history, witnessing a kind of filmmaking and a kind of friendship that feels increasingly rare. The chemistry between Duke and Maureen is palpable in every frame, a testament to their genuine affection for each other. You can't fake that kind of connection, no matter how good an actor you are. What we see on screen is real friendship translated into cinematic magic. In the end, the story of Maureen O'Hara's final visit to John Wayne's deathbed is about more than just two Hollywood stars saying goodbye. It's about the human need for connection, for relationships that transcend the mundane and touch something deeper. It's about facing death with courage and grace, supported by the people who matter most. It's about the words we choose to say when time is running out, words that can comfort, inspire, and transform. And it's about the power of keeping some things sacred, of protecting the intimate moments that define our most important relationships. Duke and Maureen showed us that it's possible to maintain genuine friendships, even in an environment as toxic as Hollywood can be. They proved that loyalty, respect, and mutual admiration can sustain a relationship through decades of change and challenge. They demonstrated that the most important things in life aren't fame or fortune, but the connections we make with other human beings. And they left us with a mystery, a whisper that will echo through Hollywood history, reminding us that some things are too precious to share with the world. So the next time you watch Rio Grande or The Quiet Man or any of the other films that Duke and Maureen made together, remember that you're not just watching a movie. You're witnessing a friendship, one of the greatest in Hollywood history. You're seeing two people who genuinely cared about each other, who supported each other through good times and bad, and who shared a bond that death itself couldn't break. And you're being reminded that in a world that often feels cold and disconnected, genuine human connection is still possible. It just takes courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to show up for the people who matter most. Maureen O'Hara lived for 36 years after John Wayne's death. During that time, she built a life filled with family, friends, and quiet contentment. But Duke was never far from her thoughts. She kept his memory alive through her stories, through her advocacy for his legacy, and through the private moments when she would recall his laugh, his strength, and yes, those final whispered words that changed everything. When she finally passed away in 2015, many of her friends and family members expressed the belief that she was finally reunited with Duke, that the conversation that had been interrupted in 1979 could now continue. It's a beautiful thought, one that speaks to the enduring power of their friendship. The legacy of John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara extends far beyond their films. It's a legacy of friendship, loyalty, and genuine human connection in an industry that doesn't always value those things. It's a reminder that the relationships we build are often more important than the careers we pursue. It's a testament to the idea that showing up for people in their darkest hours is one of the most meaningful things we can do. And it's a mystery, beautifully preserved, that reminds us that some things are meant to remain private, sacred spaces in our hearts where only we and our dearest friends are allowed to dwell. As we reflect on this story, we're invited to consider our own friendships. Who are the people in our lives who would drop everything to be by our bedside when our time comes? Who are the people we would do the same for? What would we whisper to them in our final moments? What secrets do we keep, protecting the sanctity of our most cherished relationships? These are the questions that Duke and Maureen's story asks us to ponder. Questions that go to the very heart of what it means to be human, to love, and to be loved in return. Their story is not just about two Hollywood legends. It's about all of us and the connections that make life worth living.